The Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzō Abe, has been criticized for his government's handling of the possibility of postponing Tokyo Olympics due to the coronavirus outbreak. Let's cross live now to our SABC News correspondent in Japan, Grace Lee, for the latest. A very good morning to you, Grace. Japan is eyeing a new bill that will allow government to declare a state of emergency. What can you tell us about this?
Yes, so the upper and lower houses will start deliberating on this tomorrow and the following day. They're going to try and push this bill to be enacted by Saturday at the latest. Now, what this would allow Japan's government to do is potentially enact a state of emergency, which means that governors across Japan would be allowed to stop schools, ask people to stay indoors, and of course, shut down any public events that have large people gathering around. And you might be asking, well, you heard that Japan was already shutting down schools last week. What does this mean? Well, actually, Japan's government doesn't have the power to shut down schools as a hard policy. This would allow them to do that. So far, it's just been kind of more of a polite suggestion to shut down the schools. And so now they're trying to push to have more sweeping powers and more control. They are aware of the fact that this could interfere with individual rights. So Japan's Prime Minister Shinzō Abe says that's the reason why they're trying to be more careful about this and take precautions that are necessary to ensure that people feel safe and like their rights are being protected at the same time as they continue to fight this viral outbreak.
As the government treads cautiously, they've been under fire for being very slow in reaction to the outbreak. How are they responding to this?
Yeah, of course. Well, Japan's government has been a little bit on the slow side in reacting to the outbreak. It wasn't until about a week or two ago that they announced some very basic measures, which basically was asking people to stay indoors if they didn't feel well. Schools started shutting down last week. Travel restrictions kind of set in this week. So they are kind of under the magnifying glass for not being quick enough with the response. Another thing that they are being heavily scrutinized for is the number of tests. They're only testing about 800, 900 people a day. Meanwhile, in South Korea, we're seeing 10,000 people being tested every single day. And perhaps that can attribute to the high number of coronavirus cases that we're seeing in South Korea. Here in Japan, we simply aren't seeing enough tests to know whether or not there are widespread cases here in Japan as well. So there is a lot of worry here that perhaps the cases that we are seeing are just the tip of the iceberg. And so they are urging the Japanese government to do more tests overall. It seems now the national public health system will support coronavirus tests. But the other worrying part is that the official advice from the government is to wait 4 days if you start feeling the symptoms and then go to authorities for help. For elderly folks, that's about 2 days. Experts say that's much too late for someone to be suffering for 4 days and spreading the virus before finally going to authorities. So that's another thing that a lot of people are concerned about here in Japan.
Grace, now the stickler for Japan is that the Tokyo 2020 Olympics are just a few months away. How will all of this affect the Games?
Well, the official line from the IOC at the moment is that the Olympics will go ahead. They have repeated this time and again to reassure the public that the Tokyo 2020 Games will go ahead. But there have been some mixed messages from both Japanese authorities and from the IOC. Japan's Olympic minister last week had said that, well, technically, according to their contract with the IOC, Japan's government should be allowed to hold the Tokyo 2020 Olympics at any point during 2020, not just during the summer. So that kind of perhaps pointed towards the government thinking about pushing the Olympics back. And then we also heard from a senior IOC member not too long ago saying that if push comes to shove, they'll have to cancel the Olympics altogether because it's just too much work to try and rectify the infrastructure and, get broadcasters here, all of that. So those are all kind of making people jittery about the future of the Olympics here. But the official line so far is that they do want to go ahead. There doesn't seem to be a contingency plan in place, and that's what is particularly concerning about the situation.
Grace, just to wrap up our conversation, just bring us up to speed in terms of the numbers game.
Yeah, Japan officially has over 1,000 cases. Most of them are from the ship that we saw earlier, the Diamond Princess ship, where we saw hundreds of people infected after a local breakout there. Now, we are seeing a surge in cases here in Japan, like in the main area of Japan as well, especially in Hokkaido, which is the northern part of Japan. That area is under lockdown at the moment, but we are starting to see some clusters pop up around Japan, and that particularly has a lot of officials worried because, you know, once you see some clusters pop up, it means there are more, and like I said, there's worry that this might just be the tip of the iceberg.
The clusters, that's the story we're also talking about in South Africa. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. Grace Lee coming to us from Tokyo in Japan.